Got it. Everyone good to go on my screen? Okay. So as Stephen, thank you, Stephen. As Stephen mentioned, I do seaweed aquaculture. I am based in California, and I'm gonna today just kind of walk you through what my journey has looked like. So there's not going to be too much data, anything like that. But just, yeah, sit back and enjoy the trials and tribulations of my journey through seaweed farming in the great state of California. I'm going to start you off here in our small itty bitty pilot farm in San Diego at sunset. It's a gorgeous picture of our quarter acre site. But then I'm going to take you to the way back. Let's see, college. So this is really the impetus for, why I got into the weird world of seaweed aquaculture. So I was doing my undergrad at Cal Poly Humboldt, back when it was Humboldt State University. And in 2015, I was able to participate in a group of undergrads, grad students, and faculty researchers where we were cataloging really just baseline surveying for marine protected areas of the North Coast. So we were in the Rocky Intertidal from the Oregon-California border all the way down to the Mendocino coast. Really, like as it says on the flashy magazine cover, surveying the sea. So lots of biodiversity sampling for a couple of summers, which is important for a couple of reasons. It's where I met my co-founder and husband, Torre. We had the chance to survey together, work on this in this great team with a couple of folks that are on this call. Shout out to Jackie, who was also on this team. And the second reason it was important was because of the time frame that we were doing this. Sorry for the grainy picture, but we were surveying in 2014, as I point out, and 2015, which was coinciding with the time of this perfect storm, which if you've been attending these talks, I don't think I need to delve too much into. It's a hot topic, but essentially a couple of climate-related events, UNSO events, sea star wasting disease, boom and purple urchins, this anomalous warm blob. It culminated in the decimation of a really large percentage of our kelp ecosystem along the north coast of California. So this was, horrifying to us as we were getting our marine science degrees, just young budding ecologists, like, oh, shoot, what do we do now that our favorite ecosystem is, meeting this demise? And so we looked to ways to ameliorate that, reforest these systems, grow seaweed in a way that was meaningful. And we found that in California, that was not really a thing at that time. So we looked towards the only resource that we could really find, which was from Green Wave, which is a nonprofit organization over on the East Coast, the Atlantic Northeast, New England area. And they were doing something really neat in that they were growing in a 3D model. So using the entire water column from surface to seafloor to grow macroalgae, but also invertebrates of some commercial value. So we thought, okay, we could maybe take this model, this concept, and tweak it to adapt to a Pacific ecosystem, like the one that in our backyard. We found that doing that was a bit cumbersome, permitting wise and money wise. So I didn't want to put it up here on the slides because it's just really depressing to list all of the permits and kind of regulatory steps you need to take. But it's out there. I'll send you the white paper if you'd like. So we found that the only way that we would maybe get into seaweed aquaculture, like in this decade, for less than $1 million was to apply to this new thing that the Port of San Diego was doing, which was a blue economy incubator. So it was really a first of its kind concept. And what it is the Port of San Diego putting money into new like startup enterprises that had something to do with sustainable or regenerative aquaculture or blue technology. So a really neat program that was just in its, I think, first year when we applied back in 2017. And, through some back and forth, pitching and workshopping, they agreed to fund us as a brand new company. Sunken Seaweed was born out of necessity, really, to get this pilot farm in the water. And so they approved this. They worked with us to get expedited permits and meet all of the regulatory stringencies that are in place to get into the San Diego Bay. And also they funded us for a 1-year pilot project, $137,000, to just kind of show, okay, what kinds of seaweeds can you grow in the Bay, and what are the ultimate uses of these various seaweeds. So we had our work cut out for us, for sure. And immediately, another grainy picture, sorry. We reached out to Dr. Matt Edwards, who's San Diego State University professor. And he, perhaps alarmingly, but immediately was like, yeah, well, I'll work with you guys on your seaweed farming endeavor. I would like to, he said he would like to, work with us in terms of the ecological questions being asked and, kind of be the seaweed guru, not so much the business guru, but seaweed guru he is. This is him leading his marine botany class at Bird Rock on a field trip. Very fun times. So here's kind of an overview of what we did once we initiated this partnership with the port and with San Diego State University. We installed the kelp farm, mooring blocks, anchors, chains, buoys, all of that in about a 25-foot plus or minus tidal swings deep water space. And keep in mind that 3D cartoon of green wave stuff, that's really what we were trying to go for. So this was installed at a somewhat abandoned pier on, in under port jurisdiction in the San Diego Bay, right up against Little Italy, if you're familiar with that geographically. So once the farm was in, the structure and everything, we set out to kind of curate it with the seaweeds that we were interested in growing. So all of the seaweeds, reds, greens, and browns, as Stephen mentioned, are native seaweeds to the area, able to be sourced locally, etc. And we either grew them on long lines vegetatively, like you can see here with the gracilaria shot, or we utilized space in San Diego State's sea mill, Coastal Marine Institute, which is really close, a couple miles away from the farm site. We designed a hatchery and set that up for kelp. So we did Macrocystis and Laminaria farlowii, the oarweed, in the lab, and then outplanted it once it reached a couple millimeters to our farm. And so let me walk it back so you don't get too frazzled by that. So what we found, in this 1 year of experimenting R&D, was that many of the seaweeds did not thrive. San Diego Bay, very urban influenced, huge temperature shifts and, rain events, lots of salinity questions. So in terms of seaweeds that thrived, ulva was the clear winner. Ulva is a green, the sea lettuce, which is pretty ubiquitous. Other seaweeds like our Macrocystis, Laminaria didn't do so well. It was not the ideal environment for them. So knowing this, we decided let's stick with Ulva for leveraging some additional funds so that we can look at how Ulva can, stake its claim in the San Diego Bay for aquaculture. So with Matt and a couple of other researchers, we did a grant proposal to the Department of Energy, their ARPA-E program, to look at Ulva and its ability to sequester nutrients, like the kind you might get in runoff events in an urban bay environment. So what we found was that Ulva can sequester high concentrations of nitrogen and phosphorus under pretty low salinities, salinities that you might see when you've got, an El Nino year and you've got just water funneling in from downtown San Diego. So extreme kind of freshwater lenses in this bay environment. So this was a really cool study that we did with the co-author, or the lead author here was Emily Buse, who was an undergraduate at the time at SDSU and got really into asking questions about seaweed aquaculture. She later went on to get a couple jobs in aquaculture. So this was kind of one of the first really eye-opening things of like, hey, other people are interested in this. They're not just playing along with your weird idea, Leslie. Like there's a huge opportunity to bring in lots more academic minds and really proliferate these concepts of seaweed farming, especially for ecosystem services. So we took that concept of nutrient sequestration and we applied it to another setting, this time a land-based setting, where we wrote a grant that was funded by the Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission to look at co-culture, like almost an IMTA style culture of seaweed and finfish. So we did this in collaboration with Hub's SeaWorld Research Institute, which, if you're unfamiliar, they're based in Carlsbad, California, just north of San Diego. And they're a nonprofit research institute that has been really involved for a few decades in rehabilitating the white sea bass population. So anyway, they've got a lot of juvenile white sea bass swimming around in raceways. We looked at what happens when you have their effluent water funnel into seaweed tanks, such as these on the left-hand side. And then there's Emily Buse again, because she got a job with Hubs and did a seaweed aquaculture project. So full shout out there. But what we found is that the seaweed took a huge bump in growth, both ulva and gracilaria that we grew there. And it also scrubbed the effluent water. Instead of the fish effluent going straight back into the ocean through a regular discharge, it went through our tanks and our seaweed scrubbed it of ammonium. It buffered the pH. It increased oxygenation. So it did this amazing ecosystem service while greatly benefiting the seaweed in terms of biomass production. And also as part of this, we examined kind of what would it look like if we were trying to make this a commercial product. So we did a bunch of food safety testing for, some of the usual suspects like E. coli, Salmonella, Vibrio, but a few others, a big panel of potential like pathogenic problems you might incur when you're looking at fish effluent and a culinary thing of seaweed. And it passed with flying colors. Like it was a really great culinary product that we found. So we brought it to the market to chefs and got lots of great feedback. It was a really neat study. And lastly, in exploring the grants funded projects and these cool research topics, we most recently worked with Matt and Dr. Lais Lima, who also did her PhD under the SDSU kelp ecology program, to look at the microbiome on kelp and how that might be an important factor, how it will be an important factor in creating accessibility and efficiency in the kelp aquaculture world. So this was NSF was funding this through their Blue Economy Accelerator. So it had kind of an applied spin to it, which allowed us to work with all types of groups. As you see on the right side, it was many in academia, but also folks in conservation, many tribes interested in or doing seaweed aquaculture, as well as some other commercial operations. So it was a wonderful project that I think hopefully you can have Lais and Matt give a talk on the microbiome stuff, because it was super fascinating. I won't butcher it, but our piece, Sunken Seaweeds piece in that, was really in communing with the prospective and current seaweed farmers and seeing what their needs were to kind of grow and network together. So it's a beautiful project, which I'm happy to answer more questions on later. And all of these projects and all of the kind of feedback that we got from the community and from other researchers, it definitely led me to say, okay, yes, we're farming, we're doing our own seaweed aquaculture thing, but there's so much interest as a whole for people that just want to get started in or ask questions about seaweed aquaculture. So for the past several years, since its inception, I've been an organizer of the California Seaweed Festival. And, the main reason that I'm doing that is really just to make sure that I can facilitate to the best of my capacity these, budding, emerging farmers or conservationists. And I really see the festival as a great hub for that. On the left, you can see it was virtual the first year because of COVID, but we got great turnout there. It's still on YouTube, which you can check out. And then it was in Santa Barbara and in Tiburon last year. This year it will be in San Diego. So I'll give another plug for that at the end so that you can all attend. But yeah, I'd say working with the festival has been really rewarding and a great way to just see who in the seaweed world is doing what. So really fun, rewarding there. And that kind of wraps up what we've been doing the last 5 years in San Diego, because this year we just recently expanded to Humboldt Bay. And, we're still maintaining all the operations down in San Diego. We still have access and permits to our farm down there, and really open to ongoing collaborations and new collaborations with researchers and prospective farmers. But the Humboldt expansion is really exciting because it allowed us to finally face the public and become, commercializable with some really tasty seaweed products. So I'm going to explain a couple of those things to you now. So at the start of this year, like I said, we expanded back to Humboldt. We are co-located with Hog Island Oyster Company. So we sublease space from them. And it's kind of another testament similar to the Hubs project, where seaweed aquaculture can happen in places where the infrastructure already is. And that's like a path of least resistance that there are tons of co-benefits to, or there can be, for other aquaculturists and seaweed aquaculturists. So it was an amazing thing that Hog was willing to take us on and sublease us out this pretty small footprint. But we put several tanks on it. We've got a dozen or so large tanks that we're doing tumble culture. So we intake seaweed from the Humboldt Bay, and we are growing ulva, devillaria, pyropia. We will be growing soon, and we're looking at a few other species, adding it in, but mostly we're doing dulse right now. And that's thanks to a great partnership with Oregon State University. They have a really wonderful program for Double area. So we're just really getting started up here. And it's been a fun adventure so far, working with Hog and back in the Humboldt community. And of course, I think a theme of this, hopefully that you've gotten so far, is yes, we're seaweed farmers, but we wear a dozen different hats. So we're also just trying to facilitate any way that we can other seaweed projects going on. And that's where Green Wave comes back into play. We've been speaking with them since we started the concept of the farm out here. So it was wonderful when they decided to come and plant the flag in California and really expand to the West Coast to help seaweed farms get off the ground. So in a collaboration between the Nature Conservancy and Green Wave, those two groups have leased a farm in Humboldt Bay and are checking in on the feasibility of growing bull kelp. And so Torre and I, along with Hog Island's crew, we help maintain that farm. We do a lot of different sampling and just collecting data on how the seaweed is growing, and nutrient profiles and things like that. So it's right in the backyard. It's a couple-minute boat ride from our land-based farm. So that's been a rewarding experience to participate in for the last couple of years. And the Nereocystis is doing really well. It grows great. So there's Torre sleeping on the job. Anyway, the other farm that's in the Humboldt Bay, right next door to Green Wave's operation, is Cal Poly Humboldt's own farm. So Dr. Rafael Cuevas Uribe, who's right here, helped launch, he's the aquaculture director at the university here, helped launch a seaweed farm a couple of years ago with support of Green Wave. And since then has had master's students like Kalani Ortiz right here, working on seaweed farming projects. And those have been so cool to see, just amazing levels of engagement and interest from students in the marine science and aquaculture programs, but also far-reaching beyond. So there's just been a pretty overwhelming kind of interest and support in these student projects going on in the Bay. And very recently, these photos are taken like a week ago. Kalani harvested her Nereocystis lines, and we kind of facilitated that by just letting them use our space, hauling up the lines. She got a couple tons of kelp. So there was a lot of human power involved in processing that harvest. So a dozen folks came out to partake in that, and it was really wonderful to see. Oh, whoopsie. Did not mean to go that far. Okay, so I think this is So another big push that we have done and has been facilitated also by Green Wave was to build a hatchery, very unassuming hatchery right here. It's just a refrigerated shipping container that we converted to a fully functioning wet lab. There's microscopes, there's a cold room in the back with tumble culture set up so that we can create seed spool, green gravel, etc. for researchers and for farmers that are coming into Humboldt Bay. So that's been a really cool project to work on, and to ideate this kind of modular concept of a hatchery that can be independent from universities, and could maybe be prefabbed and shipped anywhere along the coast to meet the needs of, conservationists trying to outplant or seaweed farmers. So that's been fun and dirty and cool work to do, and that's on our lease space with Hog Island. And lastly, I'll just give a plug for the other folks that have been participating. Like I said, lots of student engagement from the undergrad level, high school level, community college level. There's just been a ton of interest, and I show this picture right here in the middle because a huge amount of the kelp that was harvested from Kalani's farm actually went to the food sovereignty lab at Cal Poly Humboldt. And so there's a ton of interest from indigenous communities. The several tribes that are in this bioregion have interest in collecting some of this kelp and other seaweed for customary uses, for food. And so it's been really rewarding to be able to recognize that and get seaweed to folks that use and appreciate it, and create like a community of reciprocity up here around seaweed aquaculture. So I think that on that note, I kind of just want to leave it up to you all to ask questions about anything that caught your eye or needs attention, and also offer my email so that you can email me after the fact. But I really appreciate your time, and thanks again, everyone, for tuning in after lunch today. And to end, please save the date and attend the Radical California Seaweed Festival this November in San Diego.